And so we have the security guards in the film referring to the Terrorism Act. Quite frankly, they don't know what they're talking about. There are offences under the Terrorism Act, offences of collecting information which may be of use to terrorists, but another, I think, fairly significant change that legal cases brought about is a ruling in the House of Lords a couple of years ago that made it clear that possession or collecting of material likely to be of use to terrorists doesn't really apply to stuff that anybody might have. It has to be stuff that is particularly potentially of use to terrorists. So if that was justification in the past for harassing people who are taking photographs, I don't think that would apply anymore. So the security guards, I just don't think know what they're talking about. There is still a search power under the Terrorism Act, but it is a reasonable suspicion search power and it is exercisable by a police officer.
What I would just like to say is thanks for the invite. It's not often that the private security industry get invited to attend such sort of forums, if you like. So it's a big learning phase, certainly for me. Just to sort of make the point that a lot of those teams that you are filming and experiencing within the city are not necessarily teams that we employ or assign to those buildings. I think in terms of training, I'm not quite sure if everybody's aware of the Private Security Industry Act that came out a few years ago, which requires all security officers to be licensed, and they are licensed by categories, whether they're security guards, door supervisors, with clampers and such like. And all the details of security officers are held on a public register, which is administered by the Security Industry Authority, which is the authority obviously responsible for enforcing the Private Security Industry Act. And every security officer must be licensed in order to observe the requirements of the law. Okay, so there has been efforts, I suppose, made by there has been movement by the industry. I'm not suggesting that the industry came up with legislation necessarily, which I think has made remarkable improvement within private security over the last sort of 10 years. In terms of training, and part and parcel of the requirement to be licensed, there is a mandatory training programme which will cover aspects of law, in a very sort of minor way, I suppose. We would focus on things like what constitutes trespass, what constitutes burglary or robbery or anything else such as that. But it's advisory, I suppose, more than anything else. At all times, security officers are advised if they feel that they're experiencing suspicious activity or hostile activity as such, the message is you need to escalate to the police if possible, for obvious reasons. I think also it's important to note that during all training, security officers are made very, very aware that they are not police officers. They don't hold any powers of arrest as such, other than the normal citizen. So in terms of some of the comments made by James a little bit earlier on about comments about the law and the Terrorism Act and such like, I would agree that it's ignorance of the law as such, particularly with things like the Terrorism Act.
The other theme I was describing in the book is the growing encroachment of private management of public places, which is bringing in a lot of these approaches. Business improvement districts, for example, have very similar approaches to street photography and photographers, although as privately owned places, although actually this is public land. So, you know, the issues become really blurred, and it's sometimes difficult to know if you're actually in a private place or a public place. So what I'm really worried about is actually that the privatisation of public places is just increasing all the time. Coming on to the Olympics, which is basically a very large regeneration project encompassing Stratford City, which is it's going to be an enormous shopping complex, and the Olympic Park, which is going to be actually it's described as Britain's first park since the Victorian era, and it's also going to be Britain's first entirely private park. So all the issues that I've just been discussing will completely apply to all the Olympic development. None of this will be public land. Now, alongside that, the Olympics have long had a reputation for very high levels of security, which actually is an opportunity for security to be tested out during the Olympics, and very often it leaves a legacy of security innovations which remain with the city for years to come. And something I've written about is the use of drones by the police, which is a sort of these are the unmanned aerial vehicles which are used in military warfare, used in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've been modified for civilian use, and these are now, I'm reliably informed, going to be used over the Olympics. What we know is that we have what the police told me they call the crime paradox, which is that, you know, essentially crime, including violent crime, and I have looked into the facts and figures for this very complicated and difficult subject, you know, in quite a lot of depth. But basically, crime has been falling steadily since 1995, and yet fear of crime has been really going through the roof. In fact, security is a very emotional subject, and it's a very sort of counterintuitive subject. And although people very often want it and think it will make them feel safer, actually it does contribute to a growing fearfulness and lack of trust between people. Now,
there is a kind of a culture. Project Griffin is a culture. It's a culture in the city. It's building a culture of protection. And so, I just watched the Project Griffin video before I came here, and there were some bullet points raised in the Project Griffin video, and one of them was to raise awareness of current terrorist and crime issues, to gather and share intelligence and information. This is amongst businesses in the city. To build and maintain effective working relationships, again with businesses within the city and security companies taking care of buildings. Obviously to seek solutions to terrorism and crime, and to maintain trust and confidence in the police and other authorities. So you are quite right in saying that there is a culture of protection that's developing, but what isn't happening is the opportunity for ordinary people and individuals. And if you think about it, journalists and freelance journalists are often acting as self-employed people, so they don't have as many organisations as a business, as a network to act on their behalf when they're taking photographs. So when it's just one person that's being stopped by two big guys, that's quite intimidating, that's quite bullying. That then makes people very anxious in their working environment. People start looking around, and you're actually creating a perpetuating cycle.
One very concrete question, which is, the Met agreed that the National Union of Journalists can send representatives to training courses for public order. Can we come to Operation Griffin courses to observe and to see what input we can make, and can we come to the licensing courses for the same purpose?
I can be answered on behalf of the Griffin one. Yes, you can. What I would not want to do is open it up so that we get hundreds of people turning up. But we actually had this conversation on Friday, and we've agreed that representatives from this community, and there's also some issues around people who are drawing and sketching as well, and I don't know whether there's organisations, but certainly representatives, and we're going to arrange some days for people to come in and actually see what we're delivering, see it firsthand, and give us feedback as well. So
The other
I
question,
can't answer on behalf of the SIA,
No,
but certainly
no.
Griffin, that is something that's in hand and we would welcome it.
We would encourage individuals to participate in Griffin for obvious reasons. We are not, we're not required to do so. We're not told that we have to do so by the police or anything else such as that. It's really about trying to create an awareness within a security officer's mind of what actually is around them, how other sort of security officers and security companies liaise with the policing agencies and such like. And the idea is really to be eyes and ears on the ground. So I think that the film was very, very interesting. I think there's some points that have come out of there, and clearly we have to take some of those learning points away and try and adapt our approach in a better way, if you like.